The next topic is AI, data and automation. So what Scaleup CFOs should actually do in 2026. And I suppose before I pose this question to Joe and Aarish, I feel I'm quite well placed to interject a little bit here. So Talent Edge ran a survey last month and we surveyed over 500 finance leaders to understand how AI is really being used in practice today. There's obviously been a lot of conversation, a lot of hype around AI, and almost kind of panic stations started because everyone feels they should be doing and getting on the AI train. So the survey results were really quite interesting. So I'll talk through some of those numbers and key takeaways from the survey. But first, I would really like to hear, to set the scene from both Aarish and Joe, in terms of what AI is realistically good at for finance teams today, particularly within the business size of people that are listening to this webinar, which is that startup scale-up stage. Who wants to take this first?
I'll preface and then Joe will
Perfect, Aarish, thank you.
So look, I mean, AI is a great tool. I don't think anyone needs an explainer as to why it can benefit. I think the challenge has been within finance that everyone's expectation is that it'll suddenly be able to replace a lot of the manual work around spreadsheets or forecasting and all of these sort of things. There is not a single tool that either Joe or I have tried over the last 12 months or even before then that lives up to that expectation or that promise. Where AI is incredibly useful, especially in the strategic kind of stack, is, if you think about what a CFO does, often the work is as much around contracts and words as it is around numbers. So, you can use it to analyze term sheets or to analyze contracts, right? You can use it to create narratives around business performance. And there are multiple ways you can look at doing that. Equally, at the kind of finance operations level, it's proved really useful around transactions and reconciliations. And, we've already seen, obviously, the automation of invoice processing or data chasing or whatever it is. But I think, if your expectation is that AI is suddenly going to be able to create a forecast that, is investment ready or even, usable, frankly, we're not there yet. But yeah, I'll pass over to Joe because, as I say, he's tried a lot of this stuff out.
Yeah, I think going on from what Aarish said, I think there are very relevant cases that AI is useful. Most of us know it's in language rather than numbers at the moment. For example, if you're a CFO and you've come into a business, maybe there's 10 years worth of legacy customers all on different contracts, you can drop that in and get it to give you a summary of where the differences are. And then you can go away and make some analysis on that and make some recommendations. I think the expectation that it can do management accounts or analyze balance sheets or put together a financial model with a forecast is very unrealistic. Again, and one area that for me is severely lacking at the moment that I would love to see is increased AI within the FP&A and business intelligence area. I had one client that was selling alcohol and it had a huge amount of data set, seasonality, different regions, different product lines, different stores, different times of the year. I would love to put that data set into an AI model and for it to decide that there might be a causal relationship between certain things. So we know that people are going to buy more alcohol in the summer and at Christmas, right? We know that certain areas of the country, different types of alcohol will sell better than others. But none of these tools are able to even pull together those simple causal relationships. And therefore, it still requires us to ask the right questions of these tools to then give us that data analysis, right? Which is exactly the same as the process we've been doing for the last 5 years. Perhaps it would give us an output on a dashboard slightly quicker than somebody, using Mixpanel or Click or Power BI or Tableau, right? It might be able to fire that up much faster. But generally speaking, the analysis of the market and the questions to ask it is still coming from us. So from my perspective, I think if the expectation of AI is that it's helpful in mitigating human risk and doing volumes of work rather than necessarily doing everything, then it's appropriate to implement it at certain points.
Yeah, the human in the loop requirement is massive, and there's a few reasons for that, right? Finance is not a function where you can afford to be 70% right. Unless you have, exactly as Joe said, unless you have very strong trust that whatever tool you're using is going to generate expected results, right? And has been tested in that way. You are always going to have a human in the loop. And at the strategic level, again, if you think about why I'm a CFO or Joe's a CFO or any of you that are FDs or CFOs and working on the strategic side of the business, like 90% of what we do is driven by context, right? Context of what's happening in the business, what's happening with the people in the business, what's happening in the market, what's happening with customers, and this is all data that is proprietary to the business, but it's also anecdotal, and it's what you're sensing in the market rather than necessarily knowing. And if AI, and this is what everyone is trying to do at the moment, if AI is plugged into your zero, great, that gives you some idea of what your numbers are saying, but it gives you nothing around sentiment around the market, right? So it can't give you contextual analysis of what's going on. So I think that's one barrier which makes it really difficult to crack that side of the problem. I think the second thing is that, exactly as Joe said, LLMs are all about words, right? And so we've tried, for example, to see whether we can build a conversational financial modeling tool. And it's great, it can ask the right questions, but when it comes to actually building the model either in Excel or Google Sheets, it fails. And then you think, well, okay, but it's meant to be great at writing code, so we get it to write in Google Apps Script or in VBA. It's still not great, right? It's still bringing out hard-coded models, very restricted, and not particularly valuable in a fast growth business, because everything's changing all the time and everything needs to change. Now, if you're using it to analyze, publicly listed businesses' filings and to generate very simple investment banking models, yeah, great, fine, no problems with that. But if you need anything that's slightly complicated or complex, it doesn't work. So I think, what I would take from this is that Joe and I certainly, like, we see, and the reason we look at all of these tools is because you never know when the next one is going to nail it, right? Where it's incredibly valuable is in both analyzing what's being said, right? So obviously when you're using tools like Granola, absolutely amazing homegrown UK business for transcription, or whether it's Fireflies or any of the others, you can now make sure that whatever was said in a meeting is recorded, and that those are the actions you want to take, right? Which is massively valuable, right? Because let's face it, we've all been in meetings where they're moving at a massively fast pace, actions get missed off, or people think someone else is going to do it. Now you have an accurate transcript of what needs to be done and by whom. And again, at the transactional layer, I think what you'll see is that these tools will naturally be built into the tools that you're already using. So I don't think it's a case of necessarily needing an additional tool or having to buy in a new, bring in a new vendor. You're going to see Xero, you're going to see SAP, you're going to see Dynamics. All of these tools will start natively bringing AI in, and actually they'll just enter your workflows. What I would say, and where there is a massive opportunity for everyone in finance, is build the skills, right? Like, learn how to use the tools around AI. And by that, I don't mean buying ramp.com/sheets and seeing what it can do. What I mean is use tools like Zapier, NAN, build out workflows, look at what you are repeating in your day-to-day operations, and use those tools, hook in the APIs, make sure that that you are benefiting. Because the reality is, and this is what I say to my kids, right? 5 years from now, 10 years from now, it isn't the people that necessarily know how to build a foundational model. It's the people that understand how to use these AI tools in the context of their jobs that are going to be the most valuable, right? So you can get away with not being the best finance bro, but if you don't know how to bring AI into your workflow, you are going to struggle. And frankly, you can go on YouTube and learn how to use NAN within 10, 15 minutes. I mean, I've built, I think, 4 or 5 different applications. I summarize newsletters now. So I get a daily news digest of 100 newsletters, which I would never have read otherwise, right? Or it transcribes and then summarizes and throws out notes after a discovery call, or all manner of things, right? So learn how to use them, play around with them, and see where you can integrate them into your workflows. Don't look for the tool, try and figure out what you can do yourself. And just by way of a separate example, there's a guy that I know very well, was sort of senior in finance in a couple of scale-ups. He's now decided to try and build an AI native accountancy firm, right? So how do I think about the workflows in an accountancy firm around getting issued letters from HMRC and how long it takes to process those and all of those sort of things, and building that from the ground up. So I think, AI is not a panacea. It's not going to solve all your problems, but it will make a lot of the things that you do, certainly the repetitive things that you do, a lot easier. So I think that's a way to approach it.
Yeah, and building on from that, some of you may or may not have used Zapier, right, or Zapier in the last 5 or 6 years ago. I guess that was like, the preschool version of kind of where we're at the moment with NAN and Replit and Lovable.
Yeah.
And some of these other ones. If there are specific systems or data sources that are, not currently integrated within your organization, and it will take 6 months, or there's absolutely no scope to get it done, right? It's possible to fire up something like that yourself now relatively quickly. Okay, with a specific remit that this is the problem. I think I can pull this in here. I think I can get it manipulated, and I think I can put it over there. However, the big thing that we come into then is security issues with data and logins and 2FA and everything like that. So I think there is opportunity to improve workflows across the business, whether it be, ingestion and manipulation of data or dissemination of data of some sort across, decentralized systems and people. But doing that safely and securely within your business and in line with any ISO standards or anything else that your company has might be the difficult part with some of these solutions.
Not only that, but the other bit is that, frankly, it's hard to get API access to some of them, right? So Xero does not offer API access to your own, to your business for you to be able to build tools on top of. You've got to go through a whole process. Open banking, similarly, right, can be quite expensive, etc. So, you've got to make sure you have the engineering skills in-house to be able to develop exactly as Joe said, to make sure that it lives up or stands up to the kind of protocols that you have in place, but also, that it is robust enough that it can scale. And we're seeing this all the time. So people have built kind of native CRM tools in Lovable and then realize, because they're like, oh, HubSpot can't do X, Y, Z, for argument's sake. But after a while, precisely to Joe's point, data becomes a problem. Structuring of that data, security becomes a problem. You've got maintenance issues, et cetera, et cetera. It then just becomes easier to buy a tool off the shelf. So, I think you've got to play around, but also be conscious about both its limitations as well as your own. And, it still is limited, right? We're still very early in this whole AI piece.
That's really interesting. And, we're talking to CFOs of all different company sizes all day, every day. And it's definitely, a strategic priority in terms of embracing AI and the automations and time saving that comes with it, even in its most basic form. So, I mean, a stat here, 82% of finance leaders see AI as a moderate to critical priority, yet only 37% are actively using it. I think there seems to be a lot of fear among finance teams. I think all the time it comes down to not just the whole compliance piece and privacy and obviously sensitive data when it comes to finance, and IT have to get involved and block off ChatGPT and make sure you're using AI agents that are embedded into your work network, be it Microsoft Teams, whatever. So for that side of things. But aside from that confidentiality piece, I think data integrity comes up all the time as a reason why people are worried about embracing AI to automate things. But wouldn't you just advise, look, if you keep holding off to start, then there's going to be more advancements coming out every single week, right, with new AI updates. So would you advise the smaller business just to get cracking with those automation pieces and fix up the data as you go? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, no, 100% get started. I mean, to Joe's point, build it in Lovable, build it in NAN, build something, right? Like if it is going to make your workflow easier, you can always look to, if it's something that is functioning so well in terms of the cost saving or the time saving, then you can look to then find out how you could build it, right? If it's a substantial enough piece of tech that makes sense to be built, then it can be built, right? So no, I think 100% you should get started. That statistic you gave, 82% saying, well, you need it, 32% not having started, kind of tells you the story. I think people are looking for the killer app that is going to solve all their problems. I think with finance, actually, it's not about looking for an app. It is about building the workflows yourself. Why? Because every single business is unique, right? Yes, all of us have to process invoices. Yes, all of us have to chase debtors. Yes, all of us have to make payments. But within your business, there are going to be specific issues. I mean, Joe and I work with a business where reconciling, you are reconciling prepayments and pre-bookings that have been held on the balance sheet for 12 months for events that were going to happen in 6 months time, and you had to recognize them at the right time, you had to release cash at the right time, all of this sort of stuff. And this was pre-AI. Like, frankly, I'm pretty sure that would have been a hell of a lot easier for us to manage in those days. We had a team of 2 or 3 junior finance people literally spending days trying to reconcile through this stuff, right? With the right the right tools and the right prompts, that might have taken an hour, right? Today. So absolutely get started, start building, figure out what is causing you pain, what you can do and what you can fix within the world of access that you have, and just get going. I think the fear is because, one is, am I going to break something? Because we're not, finance people don't tend to be engineers as such. So am I going to break something? Secondly, can I trust the data? Well, yeah, you're going to have to verify the data for sure, right? You do some spot checks. Once you get comfortable, you can do fewer of them, but it's always worth double checking throughout, right? And you do that with any system, to be honest, right? Like, you're never going to trust anything 100%. And thirdly, I think, people are not taking advantage of the Zapiers and the ANs and the makers and the replits and the co-pilots and all of these things that exist. And with very low lift, you can get going. I mean, I know how to write Python syntactically, but I couldn't write a piece of software, or I have never been able to write a piece of software. I can write a few lines of script or whatever. Now I can both do that using AI and integrate that into the AI tools that I'm using. So I can build a workflow in N8N and then go back to ChatGPT or Gemini or whichever your tool of preference is, ask it to write the Python script or the or the JavaScript that is going to be required as part of that workflow, and it'll write it. And then when it throws an error, I can take the error back and I can just work through it. So you've literally got the ability to do things that you couldn't have done, right? Like in the past, 20 years ago, the best I could do was write in VBA, right? And that's great. That's very Excel specific. But now you can finance goes beyond just spreadsheets and ERPs, right? It's everything we're doing in the business day to day. It's the communications we have with team members, with senior leadership, etc. So you can just get started, right? And you'll very quickly figure out what's working, what isn't.
Absolutely. And I suppose the final question in the AI section for finance, you said correctly that every business is completely unique, but is there some kind of framework that you guys could recommend to the audience for assessing AI tools, be that accuracy, controls, implementation effort, or even ROI, for example? Is there one size fits all? I'm guessing not, but what are your thoughts on that?
I'll hand over to Joe for that. I think he's probably better placed to having reviewed many of them. Look, for what it's worth, my review is: does this do what it needs? Does this do what I need it to do? Does it do it quicker than I can do it? And is it giving me an output that is valuable? And if the answer to those is no, then it's in the bin, which is, to be honest, 90% of the stuff that I trial. But Joe may have a different take.
But I mean, ones that do work, I think the thing for me is that everything will work if you spend enough time investing in it, right? It's one of those things where, you do 100, you do 1,000 hours to learn something. And one thing that Aarish will probably agree on is when you start to use these things like N8N or Replit and build something to a solution, the first 80% is super fun. You're like, yes, this is great. This is really going where I need it to. And then the last 20% takes like 150 hours, because the iterative nature of really nailing down a single line or a single causal relationship between two data points or something else is very difficult in some of these when you're working from like the back end to like a front end form or a user interface. So that's one thing that I would say is like, if you want it to work, start off with something simple rather than necessarily building like the most complicated cap table modeling tool ever, right? Which I have tried to do and I've spent about 100 hours on now and I'm still nowhere near complete. Coming back to the question of one size fits all, it's absolutely, the answer for me is no. I think, a lot of the varying businesses that people on this call will come from, manufacturing, SaaS, professional services, all of them have their own workflows, all of them have their own different ways of generating revenue, all of them have their own complexities within their own specific sectors. So for me, it wouldn't be a one size fits all approach. The only thing I would do with every single business I'm in is optimize FinOps and have management accounts out on working day 5 to working day 8. I think if you're much later than that, they're not really of any use, and you're spending too much of your time on historic generic information. So yeah, that's kind of the approach I would go for.
I think I'd add one thing to that, right, which is we've got to stop thinking about AI tools because all software is going to be AI native moving forward. But my point is, don't worry if it's AI or not. Find the tool that works. I think, and I've always said this, I've said this for the last couple of years, I think the opportunity for all of us, working with fast growth businesses, whether you're in finance, whether you're in marketing, whether you're in ops, whether you're in any function of the business, right? And I know we have a couple of COO types here, right? The opportunity is to build micro apps that work for your business, that are, the thing that HubSpot can't do, you can build yourself, right? My entire back end of my business is built on Airtable, Zapier, and NAN. Like literally, we have automated everything that we can. That's everything from contract release to updating our CFO profiles to our the emails that we send out when we first engage with a client, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like everything that we can, well, I say everything, as much as we can automate. So far, we've automated and we will automate further. So figure out the bits in your business that can be automated, do that first. And then once you get the confidence, exactly as Joe said, start small. Once you get the confidence, you can build from there. But my point is with all the tools, when someone comes to you and says, we've just built, the AI accounting system of the future, great. Treat it with skepticism, try it out. And if it works, great. If it doesn't work, it doesn't, right? But as with all tools, if it's, what is your buying decision? If you guys are finance people, it's, does this save me time? Does this save me money? Preferably, can it save me both? Right? And if it's ticking those boxes, have at it, right? It doesn't matter whether it's AI or not. But if it's not, then it's not. Because often, and I think this is the problem we're facing. I was sat down with a VC about 2 months ago, and she looked at me, she goes, Aarish, why aren't you building? I said, what do you mean? She goes, I know people who are building like these finance tools who have zero background in finance. So why aren't you, who does have a background in it, building? And I said, because I don't see anything worth solving. And I think this is the problem. There's lots of people out there trying to solve problems that don't actually exist. And finance is waiting for someone to serve them a tool, whereas we know what does and doesn't work in our own businesses. So let's fix those first, right? If someone else fixes something for us, great, but don't expect that they're going to do it, because they are solving for something different, which is how do I raise more money and how do I get to an exit?